You should have your prints, so if you go through, you can check things on the prints as they come up. And what have we got here? Burning. This is a time of tremendous violence, and a lot of the violence is connected with religion. Like I said last week, people would burn for things that seem ridiculous to us now. Oh, yeah, right. Move on. Henry, we followed him through his ending of his marriage to his first wife. We followed him through his second wife, cutting off the head of his second wife. And then he married 4 more times. And it was the third wife who gave him the son that he so much wanted. And she died shortly afterwards. And then he married a German princess without meeting her first. Did I say last time that he didn't like her? She wasn't pretty. And he, again, annulled the marriage very quickly. And then the 5th wife, there's something similar to the second wife. Notice that both these wives, the ones that he beheads, the ones whose heads he chops off, are English. He can't go chopping the heads off foreign princesses. So the princesses who lose their heads are both English. And there may have been some truth in this case to the accusations that she was sleeping with other men. She'd have to be pretty stupid to do it, knowing what Henry was like and knowing what happened to Anne Boleyn. And then he married Catherine Parr. She was quite interested in Protestantism, Catherine, and she tried to look after Henry in his religious thinking. She tried to talk to him about religion and make him think about reforming the church and so on. And then he dies in 1547. If we think about his achievements during that period, he extended the control of England over Ireland and Wales, and he fought bitterly with Scotland. Remember, the English were a different ethnic group from the Welsh and the Scottish and the Irish. They didn't feel close to them. They simply saw them as enemies to conquer and control. And the relationship with France was not so different in a way from the relationship with Scotland or the other countries of Britain. It was just another foreign country, fighting for control, fighting for territory, fighting for land, power, influence. And he succeeded in extending England's power both inside Britain and in France, but it cost a lot of money. His war-making led to trouble at home because of the cost of the wars, which was very high, and the economic problems that came from that. Today, if we see money, we don't think that the money has the actual value. I mean, how much does it cost 1 yen to make 1 yen? Is there 1 yen of metal in here? Can I? No, not really. Okay, or 100 yen. It's just a symbol. And paper money, even more so, paper money is a symbol. There's no value inside it, it's just a piece of paper. But in those days, money really was what it said it was. So if you had £1, it was supposed to be that much value of gold. You could melt it and sell that metal for the same value. But because of Henry's policies, he started to mix the gold with other cheaper metal. So people say, well, this isn't really a pound. So this led to economic problems. It led to inflation. People, it's not one of those pounds. Oh, one of Henry's pounds. Oh, I want £1 and 5 shillings. I want more than £1 for what I'm selling. It's not enough. The old pounds, yes, you can give me one old pound, but if it's these new ones of Henry's, I want more. So it led to prices going down, prices going up, and the value of products going, the value of the money going down, the value of the products going up. So it led to a kind of chaos in the country. And Henry, who was only a boy when he became king, inherited all of those problems. The problems of England's enemies, especially its big enemies. England was having problems with Scotland and France. They were enemies. And Edward was too young to be able to sort out those problems, as well as the economic problems that the country had at the time. He was only a boy, 9 years old, and he died at the age of 15. Really, of course, he wasn't in control. He was a kind of puppet for adults who had influence and power. At first, he was in the control of his uncle, and his uncle kind of lost control, and the control went to, wait a minute, what have we got here? Sorry, I'd forgotten about this bit. Scotland continued its relationship with France. I think I said that England was trying to make, England had land in the south of France. And so it was trying to sandwich France. So France's idea was, well, we can sandwich England by being close to France. By Scotland and France can make an alliance. And that kind of sandwiches England. They've got enemies to the north, they've got enemies to the south. Okay, that kind of situation was continuing. And this guy Somerset, the uncle, was continuing that policy, but it wasn't working. The policy of kind of trying to fight these two countries. And basically, Edward was replaced by a man called John Dudley. Out with Somerset. Out with Somerset, the protector of Edward, and in with John Dudley, the Earl of Warwick. Okay. Edward was much more strongly Protestant than his father had been. I think this did come from him. I think he himself personally, even as a young boy, had a feeling about religion that he preferred the Protestant reform. I don't know where he got that from, but that's what he seemed to want. As I said before, under Henry, the doctrine, the teaching of the church was basically Catholic. It's kind of difficult if you're Japanese to think, why is this important? I mean, in Japan, when I ask people, okay, what is your religion? Some people will say, oh, we're Buddhist, maybe. Some people might say that. But then when I ask them, what do Buddhists believe? No, really. I mean, I go to the shrine, and I get a little omamori, that's it, really. I don't know what Buddhists are supposed to believe. Really, that's not my business. It's the Shinto-sama, that's the Buddhist priest's business. It's not my business. Okay, my business is simply to pray to the gods and to have my omamori and to follow the shape of the religion. But the beliefs, the ideas, for many people, not for everybody, but for many people in Japan, are not so important. Now, Christianity has always been different in that sense. The beliefs, the ideas of the religion have always been very important. Okay, so the actual teaching of the church, the things that we talked about before about the Reformation, what makes it different, the Catholic and Protestant church, those are really big, important things for people. Should we repent in our heart, or should we do penitence and punish ourselves for doing bad things? That kind of thing, it really meant a lot to people. Right? Does God say that when we die, we go to heaven or hell, or is there a manaka no tokoro, someplace in between? These things mattered to people. So then, under Edward, we get these very famous Protestant reformers, Cranmer, Ridley, Latimer. These were the most famous ones. They actually started to move the church really into a Protestant direction. It becomes something more like Luther and Calvin in Europe. It's a true Protestant church for a short time. Okay, we've got, it's kind of interesting to see the way that they did things as well. You've got public places like this. Here is, I think this is Latimer explaining to the young king about religion. Whole crowd of people sitting around or standing around listening, and then they would go off and talk to other people and spread it. And this is what's being said. Remember, they didn't have newspapers. Certainly didn't have radios and televisions. This is how they would communicate across the country. They would, big important conferences and conversations like this would happen. People would listen, and then they'd talk about it among themselves, and then they'd go and talk about it to other people, and that's the way the news got spread around. Here's another example, another picture showing basically the same scene. And then, of course, he dies, and we get Mary, who is popularly known in English history as Bloody Mary. And this is where the violence is going to become clearest. Edward was the son of Jane Seymour, and when he died, these reforms that he'd made were going to be changed again. So he was moving the church in the different direction. Priests were allowed to marry. The prayer book was published in English. People would be able to read the prayers in English. Before that, it was all in Latin. So we're getting a more Protestant kind of church. And a lot of the English Protestants who'd been living abroad, because they ran away. They went into Europe because it wasn't safe. Henry would kill them. So they came back to England thinking, oh, now Edward is king. It's a Protestant country. And then, of course, Edward died. So remember Henry's first wife, the Spanish princess. She was, of course, Catholic. And so she, Mary, the daughter of Catherine, became queen, and she was also Catholic. So the country went right back to being a Catholic country. What's going to happen to all those Protestants who came back thinking it was safe? She burned a lot of them, hundreds of them. And this is what she's most remembered for the burning of about 300 Protestants during that period. Others were put in prison and punished in various ways. About 300 were burned to death. So let's take a look at Mary's reign. Edward had not wanted Mary to be queen, and when he knew he was sick, he nominated his cousin, a woman called Jane Grey, again very young, to be the next queen. Poor Jane Grey, She didn't want to be the queen, but she was nominated. Edward said she will be the next queen because she was Protestant like him. Poor, unlucky Lady Jane Grey. She really didn't want to be queen. And she was only queen for a few days when Mary came along and challenged her with more power, and Lady Jane Grey was pushed off the throne and killed. So Mary takes control, killing Jane Grey, who is queen for just a few days. And she's also, like all these powerful people in those days, looking around at where is the danger? Okay, who could be a problem for me later on? And her own sister, Elizabeth, her half-sister, again with a Protestant mother and a Protestant, Elizabeth was a danger to her. She didn't want Elizabeth to be the queen after she died. As children, they had been good friends. So Mary didn't actually really want to kill Elizabeth, and she didn't kill Elizabeth. Also, Elizabeth was very clever. She managed to stay alive during a very difficult time. But Mary did not want Elizabeth to be queen after she died, because then the country would go back to being Protestant. She wanted a child. She needed a child, just like her father. She had that idea, I must have a child. And she married a Spaniard, the Prince of Spain, Prince Philip. Well, this was very unpopular with a lot of English people. Spain and England had a difficult relationship, and people were afraid that if Mary died, the King of England would be Spanish. They didn't want to have a Spanish king controlling England. So it was not a popular marriage, even for some of the people who were Catholics. They didn't like this idea that the King of Spain would control England if Mary died. At that time, Spain was the big #1 powerful country in Europe. We don't think of Spain today as being so powerful, but look at South America. Okay? It was colonized by the Spanish before North America was colonized by the English. Okay? In those days, Spain was the big, powerful country. And there was even a rebellion, a kind of challenge against Mary. Let's push Mary out by a man called Thomas Wyatt. He tried to stop the marriage. But he lost. He died. As always, the losers die, usually, in these situations. And then the marriage happens, and the Spanish prince becomes the King of England. And now of Ireland, which is also by now connected with England. And then things start to go bad for Mary. She has a phantom pregnancy, a false pregnancy. 2 months after her marriage, she stops menstruating. She thinks she's pregnant. The country is rejoicing. She will have a child. But by the following summer, it was clear she wasn't going to have a child. It was what we call a phantom pregnancy or a false pregnancy. And Philip, at this stage, completely lost interest. He lost interest in her. He lost interest in England. he wasn't interested in England anymore. He went off to fight in other parts of Europe, mostly in France. And remember the thinking of Mary's father, Henry Hasse. He thought, Yappari, I can't have a child because God is angry with me, because I married, a woman I shouldn't marry. So Mary is in the same way. She's thinking, why can't I have a child? What did I do wrong? Why is God angry with me? Why is God punishing me like this? Yappari, imamade protestanto ni yasashi kao wo dashita. I've been nice to the Protestants in my country so far. I know what, I'll start punishing them. Okay, and then God will like me again. You can't believe it, but this is the kind of way that people thought in those days. So she convinced herself that because she tolerated heretics are people who go against the teaching of the church. So from a Catholic's idea, every Protestant is a heretic. And so it begins. In 1555, she starts to carry out this policy of executing especially the famous high-level Protestants. And these are the names of them. And the shadow of what she did was so important for England. You may think, well, 300 people, there are many battles, there are many wars where a lot more than 300 people died. But these people were remembered all through the 16th century, all through the 17th century. There was a very strong developing feeling among English people, many English people, of look what those cruel Catholics do. Okay? And so more than just the number of those people, it was the psychological effect of what she did. The idea that the Catholics are just terribly, terribly cruel people started to grow up, and the shadow of that continued all through the 16th and 17th centuries. There was an especially famous book written by a man called Fox. Fox's Book of Martyrs. Every house had a copy. Everybody read it. It had pictures showing the burnings. It had descriptions of how they died, what they said before they died. Women, okay, some of them pregnant women, just being taken and burned. These became heroes for the English people, punished by the terrible cruelty of the Catholic Queen Mary. So that's what people remember about her. That's why they call her Bloody Mary. Okay, Fox's its popular name is the Book of Martyrs. So it should be. The actual title of the book was Acts and Monuments, but it got the popular name of Book of Martyrs. And it was published and republished and republished and republished. Not just 16th, 17th centuries, but 18th century, 19th century. It continued to be a strong influence. The kind of sabitsu in England against Catholics, really a lot of it begins with this book. And there has been sabitsu, there has been prejudice against Catholics in Britain. Okay? Some of it, you could say, Yamamoto, they deserved it. Okay, she did do a nasty thing. Okay, but these were nasty times. A lot of people did nasty things. So some of this is a kind of propaganda of spreading a story about those terrible Catholics. They're worse than animals. Okay, which helps to shape England in its development as a Protestant country. Okay, I think that's what's going on here. Here,